Okay, so let's come back onto the issue of freedom of speech and online safety and so on. But we'll start off here with the Washington Examiner. And again, we're talking about Elon Musk. And Musk saying that Twitter interfered in elections and failed in its public trust.
So this is a big admission. So Musk has come out in a tweet. I'll show you the tweet in a second. But basically, saying that interfered in the 2020 presidential election. So this would have been verboten. Certainly, want to even talk about this on YouTube or other social media platforms without getting either fact check flagged or having your post deleted, or even getting your account struck in with a community guideline strike or taken off completely. Okay, so this is kind of a big deal in this sense. So this now is out in the open. He's talking about the Hunter Biden laptop story that Twitter suppressed and shut down the New York Post as well, who ran the story. It's the fourth largest newspaper in the United States. Gosh, if Putin did that in Russia, they'd be crying to the rafters, screaming. This is a complete violation of democratic international principle. And this is interesting. So the obvious reality, as longtime users know, is that Twitter has failed in the trust and safety for a very long time and has interfered in elections. An important statement there. Twitter 2.0 will be far more effective, transparent, and even-handed. That's what he's saying. It's a tall order to manage speech on this giant platform, certainly. And he vows to make public all of it was calling the Twitter files on free speech suppression soon will be published on Twitter itself. So he's getting all the internal documents, all the things when Jack Dorsey and co were running a giant censorship farm, basically a political project. Twitter was making a loss. There was no or any intention. It didn't seem like any real effort to make it a profitable company. But it was a giant censorship project for the benefit of one party in the United States. So the public deserves to know what really happened. And he says this is a battle for the future of civilization. If speech is tyranny is all that lies ahead. Okay, we can all agree with those sentiments. Get on board with that. What shape this is actually going to take going forward in terms of there's a lot of pressure from governments on Twitter, European governments, Germany especially as an example, but certainly the UK is going to weigh in heavy on this, and the United States, at least with this administration, somewhat checked by a new Republican. But there's a lot of pressure on these social media companies, lawsuits, and they can force them to moderate speech more heavily through the hand of the regulation of government, whether it's in the EU or whether it's in the U.S. or through the hand of the courts through lawsuits. And even if they're spurious, there's plenty of money available to file lawsuits from all these different sort of more progressive groups that are sort of protecting against hate speech and all the rest of it. So this is just going to go on, and it's going to be a problem. His the former head here, one of the former heads of the community safety and trust and integrity, or whatever it's called, trust and safety at Twitter, is basically now, and there's a whole court now of people saying Twitter is now a cauldron of hate speech because there's new management. And so Musk represents this. And so they're saying, oh, it's not safe. Doing the rounds on the kind of circuit there. Roth is the name of this person. And so he's one of these sort of debrief gatekeeping sessions here at one of these high-end conferences, probably in New York or DC. And his comments are just pretty telling as to what the general attitude is at these Silicon Valley companies with these people in these very high gatekeeping positions that, quite frankly, may not be actually qualified to be communicating on the things that they are, including in the run-up to actual elections in the United States. But if we have that clip, maybe we can play it.
The morning of the Hunter Biden story in the New York Post happens, and it was weird, right? With distance and with what we know now, we forget some of the weirdness. But do you remember the laptop repair guy? Do you remember the uncertainty of the whole story? We didn't know what to believe. We didn't know what was true. There was smoke, and ultimately for me, it didn't reach a place where I was comfortable removing this content from Twitter. Everything about it looked like a hack and leak and smelled like a hack and leak. You did not want to do that. But it didn't get there for me.
So did you just hear that, Mike, at the end? He slipped that in. He said this looked like a hack and leak campaign. This was screaming of a hack and leak campaign, like he's some kind of expert on this political phenomenon of hack and leak. They were just basically going along with the same sort of, Julian Assange, or the Russians hacked the DNC, gave the Podesta emails to Assange, he published them, and therefore interventions. And so basically, is this person incompetent? These are people in really key positions of moderating speech across a global space. And are they really incompetent? They don't know what they're going on. Or are they lying? Because he's saying, we really didn't know. The New York Post is the fourth largest newspaper, staked their whole reputation on the Hunter Biden laptop story. Clearly, they vetted the story or they wouldn't have run it. Think of the legal implications if it was fake and they ran with it as a lead story nationwide in the US. It was already vetted by the time the Twitter governance board got their teeth into this story. So, I mean, what's he talking about? The uncertainty. So, he really, either these people don't understand the information space in which they are self appointed to moderate. Or they're lying and they're being completely disingenuous. It has to be one of those two, because you can see right in that interview that he was completely winging it. And it's kind of scary, Mike, that these are the people that are put in charge of these really broad-based speech control programs, and they don't appear to be competent or very straight with what they're tasked to be doing. So that was shocking in itself, just to see the attitude, the blasé attitude on that.
Yes, okay, so, but then Musk's free speech agenda dismantles safety work, a Twitter insiders say. Of course, this whole issue of online safety is the huge talking point of the day, and but you'll need to explain to me how Musk's free speech agenda dismantles that.
Well, I don't think it does, but what I'm going to show you here is just the barrage of media reports in the last 48 hours. There's like a full court press right across every global mainstream media outlet. So you can see they're setting this up right now. This is the Post. Obviously, the Washington Post is going to run stories like this. There's tons of them, especially in their technology sector. Look at this. Of course, the Israeli government weighing in, saying that Twitter is going to become a cauldron of anti-Semitism globally here. The foreign minister basically saying he's taking a lax attitude towards hate speech, etc. So it's hate speech, hate speech. This is the repeat. And look at this, even with India, with sort of divisive Hindu versus Muslim social schism here. Certain parties' interests in India are saying that, oh, this is going to open the floodgates for hate speech and extremism. India, obviously, that argument's being waged both ways from both sides on different parties on this. So that's just more of the same here. And so this is the problem. And so let's talk about this idea of hate speech. How far can it go? Now, I don't know if the UK column has covered this in the past when it happened, but Germany, unbeknownst to a lot of people, have been doing what's called the annual sweep. They do an annual sweep. It's kind of a tech offensive against hate speech, where the police are deployed en masse to raid the homes of internet users. I was not fully aware of this until recently, and a little bit closer. And yes, it's an actual thing. So in this case, German police they're raiding houses and seizing devices here. German police searched the homes and questioned suspects as part of an annual nationwide crackdown since 2016. It's been ramped up since then against online hate speech here. So this is Fesser, she's the head of state security in Germany there. And so basically, officers investigated 3 women and 6 men aged 17 to 72, and the allegations against them include incitement, hatred, defamation, and libel here. And here's what they're saying: we need to draw clear lines here and get the culprits out of their supposed anonymity. So the German government's really going after anonymous handles. On Twitter, a lot of people sock puppet accounts, or people just want to conceal their identity. I personally am not. I am not against sock puppets myself. I think there's a place for innocent accounts and sort of spoof accounts. I think it creates a more interesting conversation. it's annoying when they're trolling you, but I wouldn't want to deny people that, because I know a lot of people that work in government that are on Twitter and using anonymous handles in order to be able to express themselves, or people that actually work for Apple or Google who do that online. So there is a place for that. I know it's not a perfect system, but anyway, that's the situation. Look at this. Federal police say more than 2,000 politically motivated, quote, crimes are being committed online or recorded each year in Germany, but the actual figure is likely to be higher. This is a mainstream media report, so take it with a pinch of salt, because many illegal postings aren't reported to authorities or take place in closed groups. So they want to go after anonymous accounts. They want to go after private groups. They want to go after encrypted chat, WhatsApp, and they want to be able to police and have backdoors to, for instance, they'll be able to access your iPhone without your password. So they're using the sort of counterterrorism license that governments have now in order to access the backdoor into your devices. So they don't need your permission to get to access your device. They're just going to go seize it and take it straight up. So the background of this is interesting, and it's really in here in the New York Times. If you go back to September 23rd, this article reveals a lot here. This article will show you the depth of deep goes. So here's one story that's pretty unbelievable. A 15-year-old father was accused of violating laws against online hate speech, insults, and misinformation. He had shared image on Facebook with an inflammatory statement about immigration falsely attributed to a German politician. And the quote that was misattributed said, "Just because someone rapes, robs, is a serious criminal is not a reason for deportation." So that was wrongly attributed to a politician and a police dawn raid on the home of his 51-year-old father. So the police then scoured the home for about 30 minutes, seizing a laptop, tablets as evidence, said prosecutors here. Wieland, a software developer turned internet hate speech investigator, is in charge of unmasking people behind anonymous. In Germany, he hunts for clues about where a person lives, works, and connections to friends and family. So you're being doxxed by the German government. Okay. Is this being done in other EU countries? Is this being done in Britain? Is this being done in the US or Canada or Australia and New Zealand? That's the question. So being part of the course in China, right? I mean, you probably would have heard this and wouldn't be surprised if that was done in China, but some people might be surprised if it's being done in their own government, in their own backyard. So after an unknown Twitter user compared COVID restrictions to the Holocaust, he used an online registry of licensed architects to help identify the culprit as a middle-aged woman. So the crime there is comparing COVID restrictions to the Holocaust, which is someone's opinion. It's a comparison. It's a metaphor. This is now categorized as hate speech by this new sort of digital Stasi in Germany here. So Margaret Boost, former Green Party member of the German Parliament, was upset by fake remarks that had twisted her support for immigration into an extreme view, which potentially might incite, quote, far-right activists. So that's the justification for the state, for the police moving in heavy on these users, things like this. And the thing they're really concerned about, Mike, is that politicians are being insulted or, quote, harassed. So it's really interesting. So it was that post that eventually led to the raid of the 51-year-old's house. The father, his name was not shared by authorities because of privacy laws. Funny that, is still under investigation. And police will continue to examine his devices. But even if he did not know the comment was attributed or misattributed to Miss Baus was fake, he still faces punishment because the accused bears the risk of spreading a false quote without checking it. So they're saying, the state saying, if you don't do your due diligence in checking a false quote. So all of this is predicated on the assumption that a false quote is not going to threaten a public figure or a politician. That could be single quotes versus double quotes. It could be a misspelling, something like this. So here, several internet speech-related cases are now winding their way through the German legal system. The outcomes have the potential to create a new area of case about what can and cannot be said online, potentially diminishing the role of internet companies, i.e., Twitter, Facebook, Google, as the main arbiters of online speech by moving more to the courts. So you see where this is heading, Mike, is there's basically saying if the corporations aren't up to the task, then what it's interesting that the Google Meta, or sorry, it's now called Meta, Google, and Twitter. They just won a court challenge. I think it was in Germany. It's the Network Enforcement Act, which requires companies to notify government when they detect hate speech. So user data to the government without a legal order. So that was the argument that the tech companies won temporary stay of execution in court on the fact that they don't want to be compelled to notify governments every time they detect so-called hate speech, because the court ruled that would violate and undermine personal rights of people. In other words, just without a legal order, the government could just get this stream of reports and doxing and information on citizens. That was deemed to be a bridge too far by the court, you see. So the tech companies they won that temporary state, but that's going to create another sort of path for the state saying, well, look, we're going to have to do this through a giant state bureaucracy, and to have the courts packed with all these different so-called hate speech cases. How are those going to be adjudicated? So that you can see that the whole point, Mike, is the state is just frothing at the mouth to move on this issue. And look at what's happening in Germany. It really shows you where we're heading in the future, in my opinion.
Right. Well, so some really important points to that, Patrick, as we're about to see, because it ties in with this next section. First of all, we've got Joseph Borrell here, who's effectively the European Commission, the European Union's foreign minister. He was at the G20 recently, so he's saying, I just returned from 2 intense days of diplomatic speed dating around the G20 foreign ministers meeting in Indonesia. One of the advantages of such meetings is that we can meet many colleagues in a short period of time, and so on. But he's talking about the global battle of narratives, and he's particularly talking about the global battle of narratives around the war of aggression against Ukraine. He's saying it's in full swing.